This is the first of 3 video lectures on the Crito, uh, which is one of the 4 dialogues in your book, The Last Days of Socrates. This is a dialogue which, like the Euthyphro, could occupy us for the full semester or for a full year at least, if we were to try to squeeze out of it everything of substance that could legitimately be studied. What we're going to do is concentrate on just those aspects of the Crito that would be particularly useful to this course, to the topics about making concrete moral judgments. And this is really an exemplary piece of moral reasoning. Socrates is asked to agree to a plan which he believes is wrong. He's asked to do it largely for purposes of promoting his own self-interest. And he asks himself, wait, let me clearly articulate what my most fundamental values are, and then let me apply them to the situation I'm in and see what the conclusion is regarding what I must do, what I may not do, and so forth, okay? So, the analysis of basic principles and the application of those principles to concrete situations, that's all very much a part of the Crito. Crito, first of all, I'd like to begin by saying, let's take a look at who Crito is, because many people, I think, are quite unfair to Crito in their analysis of this dialogue. Crito has been, most scholars believe, a lifelong friend of Socrates, someone who Socrates has known since childhood. Crito is always portrayed as a man of good intellect and especially good character. I'd like to point out that when Socrates had a brief inheritance come to him from his parents, he recognized, I don't know a great deal about managing money. My friend Crito is a very successful businessman. I'm going to entrust my entire inheritance to him so that he may more skillfully invest it. And of course, that also implies not only that Crito has the skill to do so, but that Crito has the kind of character that Socrates would trust and say, I don't have to worry about whether he's going to be honest and fair with me. He's going to, because I know him. I know who he is. Crito is apparently, as I said, a very successful businessman. It's speculated that he made quite a bit of money in agriculture. Here he is. Now, he's mentioned in other dialogues as well, so we know he's a continual companion, one of the regular circle of friends of Socrates. But imagine you're Crito. You're appalled that Socrates, who you believe to be one of the most courageous and honest and decent people who you've ever met, or as Plato put it, are ever likely to meet, he's about to be executed. Why? He's about to be executed because essentially he was honest enough to make people uncomfortable with their unexamined ideas. So, you think this is totally unfair. And most people, historically, looking at it, would say, yeah, Socrates got a very raw deal and actually cost him his life. Let's say that Socrates is your lifelong friend, not only your lifelong friend, but someone who you admire more than you'd probably admire any other individual you know. And he's about to be executed for no good reason. Now, let's say also, in the cultural context, you have an opportunity to save his life. Okay? Throwing a little money around, bribing the jailers, secreting Socrates out of town, setting him up in Thessaly or some such place, would actually be entirely within the bounds of possibility. And in fact, a jailbreak, if you will, no alarms ringing, no violence, but just bribing the right people to get someone out of jail, that would be so commonplace, no one would really necessarily even be surprised by it. In fact, very likely, many people are expecting that's exactly what will happen. Socrates has wealthy friends. Not only Crito, but Plato, for instance, came from a wealthy family. Plato was himself a successful businessman. So it is so commonly done. Of course, Socrates will be sprung out of jail. So they think. Especially, I think his accusers are banking on this. What do I mean by that? I don't think that they ever expected that Socrates was going to face execution. First of all, most people in the position that Socrates is in would have gotten out of town as soon as they knew that the charges were being filed against him. Okay? And Athens basically was not bloodthirsty. He had not committed treason or murdered people or whatever. So it's very unlikely that the authorities in Athens would have gone after him if he had simply fled to avoid facing charges. And indeed, many people would have done that. Once he was in court, he could have put on a big show. That's again what most people would have expected. Instead of that, not a dramatic performance, not, my children, on their knees weeping before the jury saying, "Don't kill my daddy," which, believe me, that would have happened for many people. That would have been how the trial would have been conducted. Socrates instead said, you may be expecting that. He said to the jury, you may be expecting that sort of thing. I'm not going to do that. To distill what he said, he said, I'm going to treat you like emotionally mature, intellectually competent, morally responsible people. And I'm simply going to present the facts to you. This is what I did. This is why I did it. The charges against me, corrupting the youth, are without substance. The charges of worshiping a foreign god or being an atheist, those are inconsistent, by the way. But indeed, they're without substance. Like Socrates points out during his trial, you've accused me both of being an atheist and of worshiping foreign gods, which would be fairly serious with, let's say, an older time in Athens. Because, of course, if you get Athena mad at you, living in Athens under the patronage of Athena, if you get Athena mad at you, you're in big trouble. If you live in some other city that's under the patronage of a particular god or goddess, and you start worshiping foreign deities, that's going to be a serious thing. You could get jealous fighting going on among the gods, and when the gods fight amongst themselves, guess who gets trampled on? Humanity. Okay. In the Republic, in Book 1 of the Republic, the very beginning, there's a little bit of a setup for the dialogue that talks about how they're going to be holding a festival, torch races on horseback and that sort of thing, for a Thracian goddess. Okay, now that's not just there for window dressing in Republic Book 1. That's there to point out, ironically, the Athenians had no usual objection to worshiping foreign gods and goddesses. In fact, Plato remarks in Book 1 of the Republic that it's amazing that the Thracians actually managed to put on as good a show for their own goddess as the Athenians put on, because the Athenians get into this sort of thing. So why would you be executed for it? It's a blue law. If this is what we can get you on, then we'll get you on this. What I mean by blue law? Blue law is we'll use that term later in the course too. Blue law is a law that probably made sense to someone when it was passed, and it's out of date, and it's generally not enforced because it is so out of date, but it's still on the books. Okay, so you're Crito, you want to get Socrates out of jail, he's going to have to agree to it. How are you going to get him to agree to it? You can't just appeal to his self-interest. That's not going to fly with him. And if he's doing something as radical as what he's doing, he is going to have reasons for it. So you're going to have to persuade him that accepting this jailbreak and exile into someplace such as Thessaly is going to be a morally acceptable thing to do. Okay, so to save your buddy, all you have to do is win an argument with Socrates. Yeah. You can imagine, Crito knows what he's up against. So he's trying to think of what could possibly persuade Socrates to accept the jailbreak. I think he does actually a commendable job on that point. He figures the way to get Socrates to change his course of action is to somehow convince him that he is doing wrong by staying the course, that he is going to actually hurt innocent people or empower wicked people. If you can convince him on moral grounds that this isn't right, then you have the possibility of persuading him. So Crito knows that's what he has to do. And he does probably as good a job of trying to come up with morally convincing reasons why Socrates should accept the jailbreak, as good a job as anyone could possibly have come up with in those circumstances. And of course, he fails, because Socrates has already thought this through. What reasons does Crito give? First of all, you'll harm your friends. Well, that's a serious moral consideration to a person such as Socrates. You owe your friends your loyalty, your benevolence. You're going to harm your friends. Why? Because everybody knows how easy it is to bribe someone out of jail. And if that doesn't happen, everyone's going to say, look at that. People such as Crito and Plato and all these others, they were all either too cheap or too frightened. Okay. And that's going to harm our reputation. Well, says Socrates, what do you care what people think about you? And Crito says, look where you are. You know, the opinion of ordinary folks may actually come back to bite you. I think it's very likely that the sophist who accused Socrates thought he would light out of town as soon as he heard that he was facing possibly capital charges for capital offense. Or that once he was in court, he would have recanted and said, look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend anybody, in which case, we beat him. We've disempowered him. We've discredited him. Or if that didn't happen, he would say, okay, instead of killing me, why don't you exile me? Now, this is common. This is the established procedure if you're convicted of a capital crime in an Athenian court. You have the opportunity to suggest an alternative penalty. Instead of executing me, why don't you do the following? Now, the catch there is you have to say, I think this is what I deserve. For Socrates to say that for teaching philosophy to the youth of Athens, for getting them to think for themselves, for trying to make them morally, intellectually responsible individuals, I deserve to be kicked out of Athens forever. That would have been a betrayal of his basic values, of his basic beliefs. So no, he's not willing to do that. Okay, so he faced the charges. He didn't back down in his defense. He didn't suggest an alternative penalty of I deserve to get thrown out of Athens. Will his friends bail him out and get him out of out of Athens before he's executed? Well, we're about to see. The answer obviously is no, but we're about to see why the answer is no. Okay, you're going to harm your friends by ruining their reputations. Understand, Socrates, there's no real danger to your friends. People do this sort of thing all the time, and the cost is moderate. I've got money. Plato's got money. A number of your friends are well off. This cost is not going to be, it's not going to break the bank for us. We can do it. We can afford it. So don't worry about that. Okay? Okay, so you're going to hurt your friends if you stay, and if you accept our offer, that won't hurt us. Okay, now mind, see though, this is a moral a moral argument for why he ought to agree to it. You know, Socrates, it would be possible if we got you to Thessaly that you could live a pleasant life. It's not like we're offering you some terrible thing as an alternative to being executed. You could go on living according to your own values, doing what you do someplace else. Of course, Socrates will later say, excuse me, Athens is the most intellectually open, culturally progressive of all the city-states in Greece. If I got into this much trouble here, how much trouble would I get into in Thessaly? So if I go to Thessaly, I'd have to either, go there and not pursue philosophy. If I was willing to do that, I could have stayed here. I could have stayed here and promised, oh, you know what? I'll never do it again. Accept my apology. I'll never do it again. But I would be betraying what I understood to be the will of my own conscience and the will of the gods. Remember from the backstory, Socrates the Backstory video lecture, the Delphic oracle was asked, is Socrates the wisest man in Greece? And she said, no man is wiser. Or Socrates pointed out, she didn't say I was wise. What she said was, there isn't anybody any wiser than me. So if I know I'm an ignorant man, then these people claiming to know all these answers, to be wise men, are misleading us. That means our government, our judicial system, our educational system, they're all in the hands of fools, liars, and charlatans. Whew. Thank goodness we never face a prospect like that, eh? Well, what, Socrates, by staying here, you're letting evil men get their way. They wanted you to be gone, to be dead, to be neutralized. You're handing it to them. How can that possibly be the right thing to do? And you're taking the easy way out. Instead of fighting, instead of doing what you can do to make this verdict not come true, you're going to cooperate with it. How can that possibly be right? And what about your kids? You have children. If you're going to have children, you should stick around and see to it that they are raised properly, that they are taken care of. You're bailing out. Sure, play the hero and abandon your kids. That's shameful. Well, okay, let's give that some context. Socrates is in his 70s. We don't know how old his wife Xantippe was. The norm would be that she would probably be maybe 20 years younger than himself, which means she's in her 50s. So how old would their youngest children be? Their youngest children would not be babes in arms. Very likely, as far as anyone, it's all speculative because we don't have an actual record of it, but as far as anyone can figure, his kids are what we would call young adults or approaching young adulthood. It means their character has largely been shaped. Okay. Are they going to be wandering the streets, homeless, broke, hungry? That's not going to happen. Look, Socrates has friends such as Crito, such as Plato, who he knows have the means and the will to make sure that his family is okay. He's not really worried about that. He would be more worried actually about giving them the best example he can give them. Best way to teach is to teach by example, people often say. That's true. I guess if you're teaching theoretical mathematics, that's very, very difficult to make that case. But if you're basically a moral teacher such as Socrates, or a religious teacher such as Buddha or Jesus, you can make the case. Example is a very effective way to teach. So what am I going to do? Teach about morality? Teach about doing the right thing? Teach about virtue? And then forget about it all when it comes time to save my own skin? No, what kind of example am I setting for them? So, it's interesting. In the dialogue, well, you'll notice in your book that along the edges of the pages, you don't have to see this, it's just pointing to where it is. There are numbers and letters. Actually, that so-called marginal pagination is what scholars use to know what part of the original text is being referenced or what part of the original text is being translated by what's in the translation. Okay, normally you don't have to worry about that at all. But if you look at 45E in the marginal pagination, we'll see Socrates says, or rather Crito says, first there was the way you came into court when it was quite unnecessary. That was the first act. Then there was the conduct of the defense. That was the second. And finally, to complete the farce, we get this situation which makes it appear that we have let you slip out of our hands through some lack of courage and enterprise on our part because we didn't save you, and you didn't save yourself, when it would have been quite possible and practicable if we had been of any use at all. There, Socrates, if you aren't careful, besides the harm, there would be all this disgrace for you and us to bear. Okay, Xenophon, as I mentioned in your study aids, Xenophon was an associate of Socrates, a retired general. As far as his prose style is concerned, he has a very nice prose style. Most scholars agree that Xenophon didn't have a clue what Socrates was talking about. He was in over his head intellectually, and a very, very, very conservative man. We often hear Plato's wife, Xenophon, criticized for being very, let's say, difficult. Well, you know what? Who criticizes her for that? Aristophanes, who was a very conservative, almost reactionary man, believed definitely that women should stay in their place. Xenophon, who was appalled that Xanthippe would actually argue with men. What's wrong with a woman? Women shouldn't be doing that. Well, I'm sure, I feel at least that Socrates would have found that attractive about Xanthippe, his wife. Here's a woman who will actually look me in the eye and tell me when she thinks I'm wrong, and she'll argue with me, and oh my God, where am I going to find a female companion like this in Athens? Because those traits are not considered feminine in Athens. Okay, well, Xanthippe perhaps is just a woman ahead of her time. Well, okay, so who tells us that Xanthippe is impossible? Only the most deeply conservative, or if you will, reactionary of the associates of Socrates, one of whom is Xenophon. Xenophon wrote a book called The Trial of Socrates, or a piece, we'll say. Book is kind of an anachronism there. He wrote a work called The Trial of Socrates, in which he complains. He just can't comprehend why Socrates didn't manage to argue his way out of the death penalty. Why did you even face those charges to begin with? Why did you conduct the trial in that way? How arrogant to just stand there and say, I'm going to show you what I do, I'm going to tell you what I do, and I think it's actually beneficial to Athens. And I don't think you should punish me for it. I think you should encourage it. You should have gone, oh my God, I'm so sorry, have I offended you? And then when asked for your alternative penalty, you could have asked for exile. What's wrong with you, Socrates? It's like you walked right into this. Well, yes, he did walk into it just the same way he would walk right into battle during the Peloponnesian Wars. I may have mentioned, in fact, I'm sure I did mention in the first lecture, the Socrates, the backstory, that he was considered a war hero during the Peloponnesian Wars, the wars between Athens and Sparta. That even Spartans noted his courage, his unflinching courage. So yeah, he says, like I'm like a soldier who's been given this mission, and I'm going to walk right into it. Now, are soldiers ever given a mission which they know they're unlikely to survive? Yeah, that happens. Okay. During World War II, I know that there were times when, say, the battalion has to pull out because the Japanese forces are advancing. It's like, okay, we're going to have 5 guys stay here and man a machine gun nest, lay down fire. When the Japanese finally get here, lay down fire, delay them as long as you can. Well, guess what? You're assigned to do that. You pretty much know you're going to die. but you've been called upon to do your duty so that the rest of your battalion can get away. Okay? You are being called upon to sacrifice your life, if necessary, to save the lives of all these others. Likewise, Iwo Jima. The Japanese dug in on the island of Iwo Jima, knew that they could not hold off the whole Allied force which was advancing, that they were going to be engaged by the Allies. They were thinking, the Japanese forces were thinking, we're going to be reinforced, we're going to get air support, we're going to get ships, we're going to get troops and supplies. None of that happened. And as the battle raged, they realized, no, we're not going to get any support. We're being asked to die here. Why? To slow down the Allied advance so that the homeland had more time to prepare. Yeah, you're being asked to give your life for the benefit of everyone else. Okay? When Socrates says he is like a soldier who's been given his post and he must stand there and defend his post regardless of the cost to him, even if the cost is his life, he's using a very apt analogy. So, Xenophon in the Trial of Socrates says, basically that paragraph that I read to you, why didn't you run? Why didn't you hide? Why didn't you beg? Why didn't you compromise yourself? You could have avoided all of this if you had just had a mind to do so, rather than a mind to stand up for your principles and defend your principles, which you've done all your life. Essentially, in one paragraph, Plato is distilling the suggestions made by Xenophon and whacking them away very easily. Because that's not the right thing to do. I wouldn't do any of that because it's not the right thing to do. Okay? Xenophon's chief contribution to philosophy is that Plato, who was toiling to become a tragic poet, read Xenophon's work, The Trial of Socrates, and said, I cannot allow posterity to remember Socrates the way Xenophon has portrayed him. And he immediately wrote the Apology, which it's translated apology. The Greek word is apologia, which means basically literally to stand beside. Think of it as being, okay, I'm gonna, here I am. I'm standing up for myself. I stand behind what I've done. And here's my account, giving an account of yourself. That's Xenophon's contribution to philosophy, is that he so ticked off Plato that Plato started writing philosophy. And of course, Plato's dialogues, many would consider to be one of the most important foundations of Western thought, as well as masterpieces of Western literature. So, okay, Socrates is now going to move on to do something. He's going to say, here are the basic principles I have used to make my decision. He's going to articulate 3 important principles, and then he's going to apply them to his current situation, and that's how he's going to decide. Now, that gives us a paradigm for how we go about making moral decisions. What's at issue here? What are the principles I want to live by? And he says, these are not just things I've made up on the spot recently. I've lived my life by these principles. They're field tested. And I believe that these do promote the best possible life, not only for personal peace of mind, personal integrity, but also the healthiest relationships that you can have with your personal associates and society at large. So yeah, these are important principles I'm going to articulate. I'm going to show how they apply to this situation. If this is what I believe, then this is what I have to do in this situation to be consistent. Okay. Now, we're going to look at those 3 principles. In the next lecture, in the lecture after that, we're going to talk about how he applies those three principles to his own particular situation. Okay. That third lecture is going to be particularly important when we turn to our next reading after the Crito, which is Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail. Okay. So just note that Martin Luther King, Leo Tolstoy, Henry David Thoreau, Mahatma Gandhi all point to Socrates by name as the inventor of civil disobedience, nonviolent non-cooperation as a means for social change. So this is historically very, very important, not only the ideas, but the fact that Socrates walks the talk. It influenced a number of people who are in turn, very influential for how we understand politics, how we understand the reduction of conflict, how we understand our duties in the modern world. Okay, someone once told me, well, a student of mine told me many years ago, she said, when I saw we were going to have to read Plato, I thought, oh, this is going to be so boring. She said, once we started reading it and talking about it, I thought this could have come out of today's headlines. This could not be more timely or more important. So yeah, that's why we're doing it.